Coming in at number 10 today is Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter's comic book tale seemingly came to an end in one of the most shocking Spider-Man stories ever. Kraven's last hunt finally sees the Hunter get the drop on Spider-Man. Sticking Spidey in the neck with a dart and then burying Spider-Man 6 feet under, Kraven actually beat his adversary, which only a handful of villains can actually claim to have accomplished. Thinking Peter Parker is down and out, Kraven weirdly then takes on Spider-Man's costume, or a copy of the black Spider-Man costume, and he hunts down criminals. In an attempt to prove himself that he's better than Spider-Man, he defeated Vermin, a villain that Spider-Man couldn't defeat without help from Captain America. Unfortunately, the whole thing still ends in tragedy for Kraven. Spider-Man digs himself out of the grave and renders Kraven's victory kind of moot, but Kraven also had accomplished his main goal by besting Spider-Man, something that not a lot of people can confidently say, like I said. Convincing himself that he has no reason to live anymore, Kraven chooses to defeat himself permanently. Number 9, Morlun. Coming Home was a Spider-Man story written by J. Michael Straczynski that introduced readers to a fresh new mystical adversary named Morlun. Now, Morlun was an energy vampire who thrived on the life forces of individuals who were powered up by animal totems, and the spider totems, like Spider-Man, were his favorite. In every aspect, Morlun surpassed Spider-Man. He possessed superior strength, speed, and thousands of years of experience. Although Spider-Man managed to emerge victorious in their initial encounter, he couldn't deny the intensity of the battle. So, of course, in their second confrontation, Morlun proved to be absolutely devastating. Morlun dominated Spider-Man, leaving him battered and broken like never before. Morlun even managed to send Spider-Man off with a round-trip ticket to the pits of Tartarus. Now, while Spider-Man's demise was only temporary, his return marked a transformation, turning Spider-Man into basically a monster with newfound abilities that actually allowed him to take the victory. This battle stands out as one of the most crushing defeats Spider-Man has ever endured. Number 8, Juggernaut. Juggernaut is one of the few Marvel heavyweights you just shouldn't cross paths with. Even the heroic heavy hitters know this, but when he rampaged through New York City like an unstoppable force in The Amazing Spider-Man number 229 to 230, Spider-Man had no choice but to intervene. Now, it turns out, getting involved was far more than Spider-Man could really handle. Once Juggernaut set himself in motion, nothing could halt him, and Peter learned this the extremely hard way. Over 2 whole comic book issues, Spider-Man exerted all his might against Juggernaut, and it was all futile, as a regular spider trying to stop a train. Spider-Man could do absolutely nothing, and he got completely pummeled. Now, of course, Spider-Man did eventually take the win, but it wasn't anything he physically did that got him the victory. It was actually his brain that stepped in. Juggernaut actually ended up being caught in wet cement, and I gotta be honest, I really don't think that wet cement would actually stop this guy, but they had to get Spider-Man out alive somehow. Number 7, Doc Ock. Dr. Octopus is one of the Spider-Man villains that has a very serious claim at being the primary adversary to Peter Parker. He has consistently given Spider-Man enough grief to cause wrinkles, but then Otto is also one of the few villains to absolutely defeat his hero. When Otto was beginning to lose his life, he managed to find a way to transfer his consciousness into the body of Peter Parker, while transferring Peter's consciousness into his failing body. Peter ended up completely passing away, at least temporarily, inside the body of his adversary, while Otto gained an incredibly powerful body and a new, slightly heroic personality, becoming the superior Spider-Man. But Spider-Ock, or Spock as the fans call him, changes things. He took his genius and experience and applied it, making an awesome new suit, spider bots, and mechanical arms. He also straight up took villains to their graves and even single-handedly defeated the Sinister Six, taking the living brain as a trophy. He completely dumps MJ, but starts a relationship with Anna Maria Marconi, who became a popular addition to the Spider-Man canon. He purged Carly Cooper of the Goblin Serum, helped Aunt May walk again, got Peter his PhD, mainly for clout, and built a scientific empire that would make him a multi-billionaire. He made himself a much more efficient hero than Spider-Man ever could be. Or was. Number 6, Magic and Colossus. Now, yes, neither of these guys are villains. Not normally, but they definitely became villains, and that's what we are going to talk about. In the Avengers vs. X-Men event, a group of 5 X-Men were granted quite the power boost in the form of the Phoenix Force, which came to Earth for Hope Summers. Now, thanks to Tony Stark, it was split into 5 parts, and that's when it inhabited the bodies of those 5 X-Men. The mutant siblings Colossus and Magic were 2 of these X-Men. Now, Spider-Man is physically no match for either one of these guys, not with the Phoenix Force at least. When he ended up facing them both in the 9th issue of the event, Spider-Man got completely beaten to a pulp. It was brutal, but of course, he still has that charming personality and beautiful brain. It turns out that when one of the avatars for the Phoenix Force is defeated, the power of the remaining avatars gets boosted up even more, and it ended up that there were only a few of them left. Even though he was completely wrecked, Spider-Man gives them a little innocent reminder of the fact that if one of them is defeated, the other one will gain even more power. Now, we don't get to see the fight that takes place between the two of them. Instead, we get to see the unconscious bodies of both of them, with Spider-Man still barely standing to let everyone know he got them to knock each other out. But they still completely wrecked the web slinger. Number 5, the Thunderbolts. Thanks to the MCU, Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland, most people believe that Spider-Man and Tony Stark are as thick as thieves. And they are. In the MCU. There was a time where comic book Tony Stark and Peter Parker got along. In the beginning of the comic book Civil War event, Peter was all for Tony's Superhuman Registration Act, and this was partially because of the way Peter admired Tony Stark. But Iron Man was totally using this admiration to his advantage. He used Peter's naivety to convince Spider-Man to unmask himself to the world, which caused untold amounts of problems for the hero, not only in that story, but even outside of it. It even sort of indirectly led to the split between Peter and Mary Jane Watson. Now, one of Tony's methods for enforcing the Superhuman Registration Act was deputizing villains to hunt down Captain America's forces as the Thunderbolts. When Spider-Man made his getaway from Iron Man's forces, the Thunderbolts were on him like hotcakes, and if it wasn't for the intervention of the Punisher, Peter could have 100% lost his life, and he almost did. Number 4, Carnage. The red symbiotes always seem to be the worst of the worst, and the one that would be born from Venom himself seems to be the worst of the worst of the worst. When Eddie Brock was briefly detached from the Venom symbiote, he was imprisoned, and his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy, a psychotic serving 11 consecutive life sentences in Rikers Island. Now, when Venom showed up and bust Eddie out of prison, it produced its first offspring as a result of Thanos seeking the Infinity Gems out in space, which is the weirdest reason, but that's what happened. Now, Spider-Man learned the hard way that Carnage was absolutely no joke. The Carnage symbiote was not vulnerable to the same things that Venom was, and his strength and speed were greater than both Spider-Man and Venom. Not to mention, he was absolutely ruthless, even more aggressive than Venom, and with all the lethal of Venom and not a smidge of the Protector. The wall crawler had to call for help to fight Carnage, and from none other than one of his own villains. Number 3, Venom. That villain that he ended up calling in for help against Carnage was none other than Venom himself. Now, Venom has had an interesting time in comic books, going from villain to anti-hero, back to villain, and now to just straight up a hero. But when he first showed up, he was absolutely just a villain. Eddie Brock and the symbiote shared a personal vendetta against Spider-Man, and they united in their hate for him, literally bonding over it. Venom posed a huge threat to Spider-Man, becoming a villain that gave Peter a run for his money more than once and in more than one medium. The symbiote's unique ability to bypass Spider-Man's spider sense stripped the hero of his primary defense that has helped him on so many other occasions. And on top of that, Venom was even stronger and more durable than Spider-Man, with sharp, pointy teeth and a hell of a lot of extra symbiote abilities that the webhead was just not prepared to deal with. Their initial encounters were intense, with Spider-Man often on the receiving end of brutal beatings. This forced Spider-Man to adapt his fighting style drastically, as the symbiote-covered villain was relentless in his pursuit of the hero's demise. Number 2, Green Goblin. He threw Gwen Stacy off the George Washington Bridge, orchestrated the Clone Saga, and wiped out Ben Reilly right in front of Peter Parker. Norman Osborn is absolutely Spider-Man's #1 adversary, simply for the fact that he has caused Peter more emotional pain than any of his other villains, even Doc Ock. Now, obviously, everything that I mentioned was Norman, but Harry Osborn was also the Green Goblin, adding physical and emotional turmoil to the whole thing. Now, I don't think I need to pick one event in particular, but I would say that Gwen Stacy was the worst of the bunch. Green Goblin proved to Spider-Man that he is not able to save everyone. Even though Peter was so close, he still failed, and when you think about it, Green Goblin made it so that Peter was the one to shoot the web that broke Gwen's back. He may not have known that's how it would go down, but he lucked out with that move, not only terrorizing Peter, but completely psychologically tormenting the poor guy. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's the Spot. Jonathan Owen is a villain that only well-versed fans of Spider-Man would recognize, or it used to be that way before Across the Spider-Verse came out. Now, as the Spot, Jonathan hasn't always been the most relevant villain of Peter Parker. He often ends up on lists of Spider-Man's worst and unknown villains. I mean, when he first confronted Spider-Man and announced his villain moniker in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 99 in 1985, the hero hit the ground laughing. Literally, he fell on the ground and was laughing. It was bad. But it made it all the more embarrassing for Spider-Man when the Spot actually defeated him. Spot threw Peter in and out of his dimensions using his hole portals, and he landed more than a few good punches on the hero. The Spot doesn't hit hard, but as he says, even the strongest of trees can be felled by sufficient strokes from even the smallest of hatchets. Yes, he said that. I know it's weird. Eventually, he left Peter discombobulated with Black Cat having to help him back to his feet. He got his own back eventually, but still, the Spot took him down. Coming in at number 10 today is Batman and Oliver Queen. In the exceedingly famous Dark Knight Returns story, we see what is arguably one of the best Superman vs. Batman fights to ever grace comic books. In the last issue, number 4, it pits an aged Bruce Wayne against a Superman that has become a puppet of the government. During the fight, Superman has been weakened by a nuclear explosion, Hunter missiles, a tank, a sonic device that makes his nose bleed, and Batman even uses every watt of the city's power to electrocute Superman's brain. Batman then socks Superman straight across the face a few times and shoots acid into his face, but then Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, shoots an arrow made of kryptonite at the Man of Steel while upside down with his one remaining arm and his teeth while dangling from a fire escape. It sounds nuts. While Superman catches the arrow, it still weakens him, which is when he takes a studded bat boot to the jaw. Batman then seemingly passes to the pearly gates from a heart attack. Even at 55 though, Bruce Wayne left Superman battered and bleeding, and the whole thing was just a ruse. Well played. Number 9, Wonder Woman Dead Earth. This comic picks up an apocalyptic wasteland in what used to be Gotham City. Now, deep down in the remnants of the Batcave, Wonder Woman had been kept alive in a containment unit and was awoken by a group of humans who were running from a mutated monster known as a Hydra. After saving the Humies and liberating their city, she journeys to Themyscira only to find out that the Hydra are actually her fellow Amazons mutated by atomic radiation after the Amazons had decided to go to war with the rest of humanity who had driven the Earth to its breaking point. The world had basically bombarded Themyscira with nuclear fire, even though Diana used the absolute limits of her powers to try and stop it. Now, when Superman, who fought for humanity, turned up to try and explain why he couldn't have helped her, we see just how powerful this Wonder Woman is. Losing complete control of herself, Wonder Woman and Superman fought each other to the point of causing a great fire that plunged the world into the apocalypse. And at the end of that fight, Wonder Woman, who was double fisting some kryptonite, brought Superman to his final rest with a hole straight through the chest. Number 8, Injustice Wonder Woman. The Injustice comics are packed with intense battles, but the confrontation between Wonder Woman and Superman in the 8th issue of Injustice Gods Among Us, Year 4, orchestrated by Batman, is particularly memorable. Due to a deal struck up with the gods that is then refused and countered by Wonder Woman, who is working alongside Superman, she instead demands a trial by combat, and after Superman volunteers to represent his side of things, Wonder Woman is chosen by Batman as the combatant to face Superman. Now, being a warrior born in a fight to the death, she is honor bound to go all in. It is a brutal showdown. The two warriors initially appear evenly matched, but then Superman gains the upper hand, somehow. Despite Superman's plea for Diana to surrender, her refusal to yield becomes his downfall. Wonder Woman intensifies her assault, leveraging her superior combat skills and exploiting Clark's moment of hesitation. Wonder Woman gouges Superman's eyes, and in a swift move, she completely shatters his arm with a strong elbow, like that, marking one of the most brutal conclusions to their long-lasting history of clashes. Despite Superman's desperate attempts to retaliate, deploying all the power he has, he is relentlessly overpowered and ultimately knocked out cold. Number 7. Russian Batman. In this dystopian Earth number 30, where Superman became a tool of Stalin and his Soviet Union, Batman has become the most wanted man in Russia. As an adult, he became a blight on the Soviets and terrorized them all for revenge on Pyotr Rozlov, the captain of the police who brought the demise of Bruce's parents. He became an idol for those who wanted to oppose Superman and his regime. Now eventually, Rozlov turned on Superman and convinced Batman to take him down. So, he stole Wonder Woman, bound her up with her own lasso, and drew Superman into a trap where he then bombarded the hero with simulated red sunlight. He forced the weakened Superman into a cellar to lock him away forever, but alas, Wonder Woman managed to destroy her lasso and remove the generator powering the lamps. Unwilling to be locked up and lobotomized, Batman detonated a little boom boom that he implanted within his own small intestine, but before he passed, Batman revealed to Superman the truth of Rozlov's treachery and got his revenge in a really roundabout kind of way. Number 6. Muhammad Ali. Undoubtedly one of the greatest boxers in the history of the sport, this legendary fighter has won some incredible fights. But what other boxer can claim to have TKO'd Superman himself? After aliens demanded that Earth's greatest champion battle their own warrior, Superman and Ali go one-on-one to determine who will represent Earth in the upcoming fight. With Superman temporarily depowered when he steps into the ring, Ali, with his superior skill, completely puts Superman in his place, with Superman falling to the mat after taking a hail of punches. Afterwards, the pair teamed up to help drive back the invading aliens, and the whole story was published in a special issue back in 1978 and reissued more recently in 2010. Number 5. Shazam. Now everyone knows that Superman is weak to kryptonite. It's one of his few main weaknesses. Another one of those rare weaknesses would be magic. Many magic-wielding superheroes exist in the DC universe, but of all of them, Billy Batson's alter ego Shazam, or Captain Marvel if we want to be problematic, is one of the only main ones that can also compare on a physical level with the Man of Steel. Shazam has been sent out against the Man of Steel on many different occasions, and while his magic does give him a distinct advantage, the fact that he's actually a kid usually means that Superman can outthink or outstrategize him. But then, the magic kind of levels the playing field. Despite that though, Shazam has completely knocked out Superman in 1997's JLA issue 29. Now to be fair, he totally sucker punched Superman, but that was just the first punch. He then followed that up with a few lightning-infused punches that completely floored the man. More recently though, in Batman/Superman 2019, issue number 2, the Joker infected several different heroes with Joker toxin, including Shazam, and he faced Superman mano a mano. And we get a hand-wavy reason for why Superman will never beat Shazam in normal fights. It's simply because every time he goes to punch Shazam, all he can see is Billy Batson, and he falters. Superman is just too much of a good guy to hit Billy, and so he gets hit much harder in return. Number 4. Venom. Now, to be fair, this is back when Venom was not a superhero, but he is now, so fair game, I say. Superman and Venom crossed paths in the DC Marvel All Access crossover event in 1996 and 1997. This encounter occurred when the two universes merged temporarily, causing confusion and displacement among characters. Venom found himself in Metropolis wreaking havoc and searching for answers. Now upon stealing a young woman, Superman intervened to rescue her. Their battle proved to be one of Superman's toughest challenges ever, resulting in one of his most humbling defeats. Venom matched Superman's incredible strength, withstanding the hero's attacks and immobilizing/blinding Superman with webbing, leaving him vulnerable. Superman used his heat vision to free himself and he pursued Venom, but while Superman landed punches, Venom remained pretty much unaffected. With a vendetta against both Superman and Spider-Man, Venom nearly smothered Superman with his tendrils, pushing the hero to the brink of defeat. It took the combined efforts of Superman, Spider-Man, and Access, a multi-dimensional hero, to defeat Venom finally, with Access utilizing a sonic generator to exploit the symbiote's sonic vulnerability. Venom was ultimately vanquished, but not before showing that Superman had no idea how to handle this symbiote. Number 3, Thor plus the Avengers. The God of Thunder has taken on the Man of Steel before. During the JLA Avengers number 2 in 2003, Kal-El and Thor faced each other in a fierce battle. The Kryptonian was on the losing side of things until he managed to lift Mjolnir and even caught it mid-air. Kal-El won that fight by the skin of his teeth, but he was left bruised and battered, and that was more than enough of an opening for Thor's buddies to do what they do best: avenge him. The Avengers' heaviest hitters, Iron Man, Hercules, Wonder Man, the Vision, and She-Hulk dogpiled on Superman and pummeled him until he was completely unconscious. Number 2, Alfred Pennyworth. I don't care what any of you say, Alfred Pennyworth is the greatest superhero of them all. In the alternate universe where the Injustice games and tie-in comics take place, Superman has turned evil and comes to the Batcave to pay his former ally, Bruce, a brutal visit. After breaking Batman over his knee, Superman finds a new opponent when Alfred intervenes. It sounds like a fight that Superman would win in a heartbeat, but with temporary superpowers granted by a pill called 5U93R, which grants heightened strength and endurance, Alfred knocks Superman to the floor with a punishing headbutt before pounding his face, all while screaming about how disappointed he is in Superman and how Superman has hurt his family. Tell him, Alfred. Tell him good. Number 1, Orion. Orion is a new god and the son of Darkseid, and as a hero with a dark ancestry, he is quite the conflicted do-gooder. He has many forms and he has many abilities. He exists beyond the normal multiverse on a higher plane called the Sphere of the Gods. Born on Apocalypse but adopted by the gods of New Genesis, Orion is in a constant war with his inner darkness and with his father, Darkseid. Now, Orion is repeatedly praised and stated to be a warrior with skill and ferocity second to none, and there have been more than a few times where he has faced the Man of Steel and brought the guy down quite a few pegs. In one story, Death of the New Gods, Orion comes to Earth believing that Hector Hammond had hidden inside Superman's subconscious. Seeing Superman as a threat to the universe, Orion begins the fight with a brutal sucker punch before completely walloping the Man of Steel out of a space station. He's been able to go toe-to-toe with a sun-dipped Superman when the rest of the JLA couldn't do a single thing. He's been flown into the ground by Superman, who then speed blitzed the guy, and Orion just waited till Superman was finished, smiling the whole time before swatting him into the sky like a bug. He's moved so fast that he snatched up Superman before he or Wonder Woman could even react, and then he chucked the Man of Steel into a river. He's one-shot knocked out Superman with his Astro harness, grabbed him, and then teleported away while saying how one day he will finally have a challenge, and that's all without reaching the full limits of his power. The guy is a beast.
At number 10 is Alfred Pennyworth, who's only at number 10 because he's not technically a superhero, but that doesn't make this old man with a peg leg giving Batman an absolute beatdown any less entertaining. A decorated war vet, Alfred reaches a breaking point with Bruce Wayne's despondent demeanor. Then the unthinkable happens as Alfred, with unwavering resolve, delivers a resounding slap to Batman's face. Now Bruce, challenged, resorts with a defiant don't. But Alfred remains undeterred, and in a confrontation that defies expectations, Alfred, despite his age and prosthetic leg, stands his ground. He points out Bruce's lack of experience in war, delivering impactful blows that leave Batman spewing all kinds of red bodily fluids. However, a desperate Batman resorts to a cheap shot, targeting Alfred's fake leg to gain an advantage, and putting Alfred on the floor. It's a surprising turn of events that prevents Batman from facing utter humiliation. The clash between the Dark Knight and his trusted butler reveals unexpected facets of their dynamic. At number 9 is Aquaman. Nobody leaves Batman gasping for air quite like Aquaman does. Their clash in the Legends of the DC Universe number 27 showed the relentless determination of Arthur Curry. See, despite Batman claiming victory, Aquaman's relentless slugfests of fists echoed through the pages and left an indelible mark on Batman's ego, leaving us all questioning the Dark Knight's dominance within the League. In recent encounters, Aquaman opts for a strategic shift, abandoning the conventional blows for a menacing Darth Vader-style throat grip. Batman, with teeth bared and gritted, caught in Curry's grasp, is completely vulnerable to a fatal trident thrust. A twist of fate, however, as Wonder Woman intervenes, preventing Gotham's Guardian from becoming an aquatic feast for the Justice League. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I would seriously appreciate it. It helps the channel get more views reviews to more people, and thanks for helping us out. At number 8 is the Punisher. Enter Frank Castle, a no-nonsense vigilante who's armed to the teeth. In the 1994 crossover issue, Castle tests Batman's trademark patience. Channeling Ra's al Ghul's philosophy from Batman Begins, Castle asserts that criminals thrive on society's understanding. He brings this belief crashing into Batman's world, landing punches that resonate with unparalleled force. See, the Punisher's primal fear-inducing aura prompts Batman to step in just before he dispenses justice to the Joker with a bullet. Yeah, you heard me right. Batman, the protector of Gotham, is compelled to save the Joker from the Punisher's lethal resolve, forcing him to quite literally bite the bullet. Enter a moment of raw intensity where the Punisher nearly executes the Joker as Batman, driven by an unfamiliar fear, intervenes just in time. Batman, shielding the Crown Prince of Crime from a hailstorm of bullets, urging the clown to, quote, "Run! Run for your life!" Seems that even the world's greatest detective can be unnerved, and in this clash of ideologies, even the Bat bows to the uncompromising Punisher. At number 7 is Superman. Batman has faced numerous foes, but none seem to humble the Dark Knight quite like Superman does. Now, despite Batman's meticulous planning and strategic brilliance, the Man of Steel consistently thwarts his best-laid schemes and emerges victorious time and time again. Now, while it's clear that Batman was about to have the last laugh in the movie, in the comic books, it's typically Superman who delivers the final blow. For example, in The Dark Knight Returns, Batman is decimated body and soul by Superman's overwhelming power, where Superman crushes Batman physically and spiritually. Superman Batman number 2 exposes just what happens when the Dark Knight's meticulous planning and strategy ultimately backfires, nearly costing him his life. Even armed to the teeth with kryptonite in Lex Luthor Man of Steel, Batman still faces defeat. Superman's sacrifice witnessed Batman's complete manhandling, albeit under Superman's mind control. Now, while circumstances may vary, the pattern still holds. When true to their characters, Superman prevails, leaving Batman's plans in shambles. Clash of these iconic heroes often leans in favor of the last son of Krypton, unfortunately for Batman. At number 6 is the Hulk. Oh boy, this one's gonna be brutal. In the 1996 crossover, Batman faced the behemoth Green Goliath, and the odds were about as lopsided as a seesaw with an elephant on one end. The Hulk, a powerhouse of rage and raw strength, had Batman teetering on the brink of defeat. Yet, to everyone's surprise, the Dark Knight actually displayed an uncanny resilience. Dodging airborne cars and defying the laws of physics of precarious situations, Batman showcased a level of agility that defied his moral origins. The Joker, usually reveling in chaos, momentarily doubted Batman's survival, urging the Hulk to crush him into a paste. It was a moment of uncertainty that hung in the air like the impending collision of titans. But, in a twist of fate, Batman unleashed a surprising tactic, boxing the Hulk's ears and actually disorienting the colossal adversary, which is quite surprising. The tables turned momentarily, but the Hulk's recovery was swift and furious. Batman, physically outmatched, found himself pinned against the wall by a massive machinery hurled by the Green Giant. Now, in the end, intellect did prevail over brawn, but not without leaving Batman physically battered by the sheer force of his much larger Marvel foe. At number 5 is Jason Todd. Batman's legacy is impeccable, but even the Dark Knight has faced some moments of vulnerability. Take Jason Todd, once Robin, who endured a brutally fatal encounter at the hands of the Joker's crowbar and rigged explosives, challenging Batman's ability to protect his own. Now, in the aftermath, Batman was haunted by guilt, and he preserved Todd's empty costume in the Batcave. But upon Todd's resurrection, he sought revenge, mirroring Batman's methods with a touch of fatal brutality, aiming to bring down both the Joker and Batman in one foul and vengeful swoop. Through meticulous planning, Todd bested Batman, momentarily seizing control. The apprentice turned adversary, he orchestrated a plan that brought Batman to his knees, bringing the Caped Crusader face to face with the end of a loaded barrel, aimed squarely between Bruce's eyes. Now, ultimately, while Todd did win the showdown, his pride ultimately cost him the mission, with Batman coming out on top. Nevertheless, this battle is a compelling twist, showcasing that even the mighty Batman can be outsmarted by his own protege. In the intricate dance of heroism and vendetta, the line blurs, and the student opponent can become the master of humbling the indomitable. At number 4 is Wonder Woman. In the realm of Caped Crusaders, Batman stands as the icon of justice, but what happens when the tables turn? Wonder Woman, with her Amazonian might and unyielding sense of duty, humbles the Dark Knight in Wonder Woman the Hikatea. Bound by a sacred Themysciran ritual, Diana becomes the guardian of a remorseful unaliver, Danielle Wellis. Batman, the ever-enforcer of Gotham's law, clashes with Wonder Woman over justice and morality. The battle that unfolds between them isn't just physical, but also symbolic. Wonder Woman, invoking the ancient ties that bind her, rejects Batman's demand to hand over Danielle. The clash becomes a collision of principles: moral justice versus the eternal vows. The narrative adds layers to Wonder Woman's mythology, showcasing her physical prowess over the formidable Batman. In the end, it's not just rain-soaked streets, but the power dynamics that leave Batman beneath Wonder Woman's literal and metaphorical heel. At number 3 is Green Lantern. In the vast world of superhero showdowns, few moments stand out as much as the time Batman faced off against Hal Jordan. It wasn't a battle of gadgets or cunning strategy either. It was just a straightforward, old-fashioned punch to the face. Picture this: Batman, typically in control, caught off guard by a sudden, unrelenting right hook from the Emerald Warrior. It wasn't about complex plans or intricate maneuvers or even magic in this case. It was raw power meeting unexpected vulnerability. This story showcased Hal Jordan's strength, not just in constructs and willpower, but in a simple, well-timed punch that left the Caped Crusader on the ground. Batman's aura of invincibility was shattered at that moment, a humbling experience for a hero used to being one step ahead. Hal Jordan's unexpected uppercut spoke volumes about the potency of human connection, even in the midst of cosmic powers. At number 2 is Swamp Thing. In the vast tapestry of the DC universe, the clash between Swamp Thing and Batman stands out as a peculiar chapter. You see, picture this: Gotham is typically a concrete jungle, but it was transformed into a leafy labyrinth by Swamp Thing's botanical prowess. Why? Well, it's a classic tale of love, justice, and the unexpected consequences of interspecies romance. Swamp Thing's wife, Abby, faced legal trouble for her amorous escapades with the Tree Man. The trial brought the Swamp Thing to Gotham, and Batman found himself ensnared in a verdant vendetta. Swamp Thing and his green allies delivered a beating that left Batman battered, but still breathing. Their motive was to ensure Abby's safety and make a point that Gotham's conventional weapons were useless against the forces of nature. In this arboreal encounter, Batman learned that even in his own urban fortress, nature could still turn the tables. And number 1 is Catwoman. This is the very reason why you never want to cheat on a crazy cat lady, even if your name is Batman. Now allow me to set the scene. Batman 355, it's 1983, and Gotham's alleyways witness the aftermath of a love gone sour. See, Selina Kyle, the infamous Catwoman, discovers Batman's new flame, Vicky Vale, and what follows is a visceral confrontation, a snapshot of heartbreak and vengeance. In a frenzy of emotion, Catwoman launches into a ferocious assault, culminating in a superpowered knee to Batman's jaw. The Dark Knight, typically composed, finds himself sprawled out on the floor and disoriented. Catwoman, momentarily unhinged, contemplates the line between lover and adversary, and as she hovers over the edge of tragedy, sanity prevails, sparing Batman from a lethal fate. But don't get it twisted, Catwoman, momentarily blinded by rage, contemplated a fatal finale. "Bruce," she says, "I almost unalived you." I can't say the word, but you know what I mean. "I was that close," she confessed. This was a breakup with a lethal twist, a snapshot of passion turned Perleus. Batman, ever resilient, quipped about his robust jaw, the sole defense against Catwoman's momentary madness.
Number 10, The Punisher. In the early 2000s, Punisher faced off with Wolverine in Punisher number 16 and 17. Essentially, the Punisher found himself in the crosshairs of Logan, and he needed to buy himself some time without Wolverine getting in his way. To do this, Punisher blows off Wolverine's face with a bit of buckshot in Punisher number 16. Now, thanks to his healing factor, Logan is still standing with his face already starting to heal over his exposed adamantium skull. So obviously, that didn't buy the Punisher much time at all. Instead, in Punisher number 17, Frank Castle makes things just a little bit more below the belt. Literally, as he wiped Wolverine's gonads off of the playing field in a similar way to how he took off Wolverine's face. But But of course, even this won't stop the mutant, so Frank Castle resorts to even more drastic measures. Needing the means to give himself a day or two at least before Logan will start coming after him again, the Punisher uses a steamroller to slowly but completely flatten Logan, and then he parks it there and walks off to do his business. If anything, I think this is kind of a testament to how powerful Wolverine actually is, but still, it happened. It was cool. Number 9. Spider-Man. It should be obvious, but you don't dare insult Mary Jane to Peter's face. In Amazing Spider-Man issue number 522, Peter is awoken with a call about a newspaper article claiming that Mary Jane had a little, entanglement, we shall say, with Tony Stark. Now obviously this is not true, and actually it was a setup by a villain, but that's not the point right now. Peter gets out of his bed in Stark Tower and goes looking for his wife. Along the way, he runs into Wolverine in a room with a very lovely high-up view of the city. Now, Logan decides to start going on about how Mary Jane messed up big time, and after a warning from Peter to stop, he decided to comment on her lack of brains. This lovely little comment gets him thrown through unbreakable glass and a really colorful way to catch a cab. Number 8. The Hulk. The first rivalry Wolverine ever had in comic book history is with the Incredible Hulk. The Hulk is basically just a ball of increasingly strong muscle, and he just gets more and more strong the longer the fight goes on, and the more mad he gets. He can dish out basically untold amounts of damage. As for Wolverine, he can take untold amounts of damage, almost always coming back thanks to his incredible healing factor. Their rivalry began with the Incredible Hulk number 181 when Wolverine was first ever introduced, coming in between the Hulk and the Wendigo. Then in the Incredible Hulk number 340, Wolverine takes on the Grey Hulk, going into a berserker rage, ripping into the Hulk like never before. It is awesome to see, that is, until the Hulk heals and makes Wolverine one with the ground. The worst time Hulk defeated Wolverine though would have to be in a different universe, specifically the Ultimate Universe. Here, the Hulk, who was honestly a bit more of a villain to be honest, managed to completely rip Wolverine in half and toss the bottom half far, far away, giving Wolverine the challenge of trying to travel with half a body to reclaim his legs. Number 7. Beast. For the longest time, I actually thought that Beast was one of the better heroes out there, and that's because I didn't know Beast, apparently. Beast is a dick. Dr. Hank McCoy is one of the 8 smartest people in the world, and being smart in comic books seems to be a pretty easy path to being morally dubious. Don't get me wrong, Wolverine isn't a Boy Scout by any stretch of the imagination, but he still holds his morals. Wolverine and Beast were actually friends. Beast stuck with Wolverine during the Schism event, and he was also on the side of the Avengers with Wolverine during the Avengers vs. X-Men. But despite that, in order to deal with external threats to the new mutant nation of Krakoa, Beast has taken a position as the chief of the intelligence agency X-Force, which has almost completely cost him his morality. McCoy has chosen some questionably authoritarian actions to guarantee the Krakoan sovereignty, like sabotaging the country of Terra Verde, squirreling away funds to open a space station prison, and interrupting one of Wolverine's resurrections to attach an obedience collar to him and send him on clandestine operations, all of which was kept secret from the rest of X-Force. This ticked off Wolverine, which in turn ticked off Beast even more. He sent Wolverine on a mission so that he would be captured for an auction that Hank attended, and then he literally showed Wolverine to the afterlife in order to resurrect Logan again in a primitive state and turn him into Weapon X. Where Beast sent him on more missions, Beast has become a literal villain, and he just keeps getting worse and worse as time goes on. Number 6. Gambit. As is usually the case between two popular characters, the Raging Cajun, Gambit, and Wolverine have each actually scored a couple wins over each other, but one of the most humiliating defeats fell squarely on Wolverine's hairy shoulders. In Uncanny X-Men number 273, the two heroes decided to face off in the Danger Room, the X-Men's training facility, so obviously they weren't out to end the other's life or anything, but the only thing on the line here was pride, and Wolverine absolutely lost some this day. Though they initially looked evenly matched, Gambit gained the upper hand by making the Danger Room conjure up Lady Deathstrike. Logan was so distracted that he didn't realize it was a trick until too late. Gambit got Wolverine with a few staff strikes before knocking Wolverine on his back and pressing his staff to his throat. This even prompted a concerned Jubilee to randomly burst into tears over Wolverine's welfare. Looking at the panel now, it's actually kind of hilarious. Number 5. Captain Captain America. It is no secret that Captain America is the most decorated soldier in the Marvel Universe. This is owing to his enhanced abilities, but it's mostly due to his experience, guts, and heart. He and Wolverine have had their fair share of battles, with the first one as early as 1941, and Cap's usually come out on top. A large reason for Cap's ability to defeat Logan probably has to do with his discipline, as Logan tends to go berserk way too often in a fight, which leaves him prone to making a mistake his opponent can capitalize on, and that's all that Captain America is about. It is also worth noting that Captain America was the original Weapons Plus. He is basically the granddaddy to the source of half of Wolverine's power and training. We gotta imagine that Cap has got a huge advantage over old Wolvie here. He even beat the snot out of Wolverine when Cap was turned into a werewolf, picking up Wolverine and chucking him into a group of other werewolves like he was a bowling ball. Number 4. Daredevil. During the Enemy of the State storyline, Wolverine challenged a lot of superheroes. During this fight, Logan was being forced to go after Daredevil in his own home. Now Logan was really being guided to take on Daredevil in the hopes of drawing out Elektra, but the fight wasn't as easy as Logan's controllers were likely hoping it would be. Even with the surprise attack in his own home, Daredevil was quickly ready for the fight. The odds were further stacked against Daredevil because Logan had brought along over a dozen of his new friends who happened to be ninjas armed with bows and swords. Daredevil handled it just like a video game and took out the nameless goons before moving on to the big old boss. But even then, he was just looking to get through to Logan rather than just taking him down. Daredevil did have home field advantage though, obviously knowing his own home. So when he got knocked down, he knew his weight set was nearby and he just smacked Logan in the face with a dumbbell. The blow was enough to break through the mind control long enough that the fight came to an end for the time being. Number 3. The Thing. The Thing is one of the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe, able to stand toe-to-toe with the Hulk in battle. He and Wolverine have had their scrapes, and most of the time, Logan's been on the losing side. In one little altercation taking place in Fantastic Four 1961, issue number 374, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, Professor Hulk, and Spider-Man, who had previously taken the place of the Fantastic Four temporarily, were hunting for Johnny Storm, who had accidentally destroyed part of Empire State University. This led to an altercation between the four heroes and the actual Fantastic Four. When Wolverine went to attack Susan, Ben Grimm grabbed the Canadian and slammed him into the ground, calling him an arrogant little creep. But Wolverine in his rage used all his might and slashed Ben across the face, famously disfiguring the character. But the Thing got his payback as he yells, "You freaking little psycho," and then he whacks Wolverine with one punch, sending him flying through not only the wall, but through the adjacent building and straight into the next one over. Number 2. Deadpool. Deadpool and Wolverine first met in 1994's Wolverine number 88. While Wolverine may be stronger, Deadpool's speed, healing factor, his skill in combat, and his absolutely buck-wild behavior has allowed him to get the drop on Wolverine multiple times and do a lot of damage many different times. In their first ever encounter, the Merc with the Mouth ambushes Wolverine while he's checking up on Garrison Kane, another Weapon X experiment. Now during the ensuing fight, Deadpool earned his reputation as one of Marvel Comics' most brutal mutants by stabbing his two swords into Wolverine's heart and lungs. Now while this typically would not phase the healing mutant, Wolverine had actually recently lost his healing factor during a bout with Magneto. Thankfully for Wolverine, his healing factor had begun to slowly return in the days leading up to this fight with Deadpool, allowing him to survive the wounds he'd suffered and win a rematch, but he did need help to do that. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Spock. There have been a few characters that have stopped Wolverine in one move, but this one really comes out of left field. In a crossover between the X-Men and Star Trek, Logan faced Mr. Spock. Faced is kind of giving Wolverine too much credit though. Upon boarding the Starship Enterprise, Wolverine moved to attack Spock, only to discover that Spock, one, not only knew who Wolverine was, but Wolverine also discovered the effects of the Vulcan nerve pinch. In literally one quick move, Spock used the nerve pinch to knock Wolverine to the ground almost instantly. It's another case of skill winning against brute strength, and that's why Wolverine needs to learn a little finesse.
At number 10 is Tony Stark himself. Perhaps Tony's biggest threat is himself. The story also ties into how the rest of the superheroes managed to forgive Stark after the whole Civil War thing. You see, during a showdown with Norman Osborn, Tony had Extremis in his system, and Osborn wanted to take the secrets locked in Tony's brain, so Tony had to take drastic measures. Essentially what he did was wipe away his memories by giving himself a degrading neurological condition condition, not unlike an accelerated dementia, which would eventually wipe his brain clean. After that, they sort of hit the reset button and rebooted Tony with an old backup of his brain from before all the Civil War drama. So this Tony hadn't got tangled up in all that mess yet, thus making him oblivious to his actions during the time of Civil War. The other heroes had to let go of blaming him because technically he hadn't done the stuff they were mad about, even though, let's be real, he probably would have done it all over again if given the chance. Tony got a clean slate, but everybody knew he could mess up again. That's the thing about heroes, they forgive but they don't forget, and with Tony Stark, there's always that shadow of doubt looming around. At number 9 is Spider-Man. This is probably one of the most creative ways Tony's been taken out. In an alternate Back in Black timeline, tragedy strikes when Mary Jane becomes the victim of a sniper hired by the Kingpin instead of Aunt May. You see, in the original story, Aunt May survives the attack, but in this timeline, MJ was hit instead and perished instantly. Consumed by loss and rage, Peter Parker, fueled by vengeance, takes a dark turn, hunting down the sniper responsible for MJ's demise and ending him, confessing to Aunt May before adopting the black suit once more and targeting Wilson Fisk. Despite efforts from Iron Man and the Avengers to intervene, Peter's overwhelming emotions blinded him. He confronts Iron Man in a heated clash where Tony Stark attempts to reason with him. Ignoring Tony's pleas, Peter forcibly redirects Iron Man's own hand repulsor towards his chest just as he's about to use his repulsor ray, causing Tony to unintentionally destroy his own arc reactor. Pretty freaking clever. Exploiting this moment, Peter uses his webbing to strip off Tony's armor, rendering him defenseless. With Iron Man out of the way, Peter continues his pursuit of Fisk, leaving Tony unable to prevent the imminent danger posed by Peter's unchecked fury. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. And number 8 is Cable. This one's super badass because it's yet another example of Stark's own genius being used against him. You see, Cable travels backwards in time to Earth amidst the Avengers vs. X-Men tussle, fiercely protecting Hope, whom he considers his daughter. In a confrontation with Tony, Cable urges him to back off, but Tony, being Tony, just refuses. The clash begins, showcasing Cable's plight as he's infected with a technovirus slowly taking his life, but you see, Cable wears an Iron Man chest plate and fires a beam at Tony. And the twist here is that Cable snarkily notes that he's using Stark's own tech against him that Tony hasn't even invented yet, giving Iron Man a taste of his own medicine. After exchanging blows, Cable emerges triumphant, leaving Tony in his wake. Super fun to see Cable use Tony's tricks against him like that, all in the name of protecting his daughter. And number 7 is Thor. Our thumbnail today has literally the coolest backstory. You see, in the comics, you'll notice a certain god of thunder was missing from the entire Civil War ordeal. That's because at the time, Thor was deceased. But not for long, of course, because this is comic books we're talking about. Now, during this time, Iron Man was kind of the big shot running the show at S.H.I.E.L.D. and taking charge after winning the first Civil War. Captain America seemed out of the picture, and Stark even made a clone of Thor, which he used to lie to the whole world, saying Thor supported his cause. Then Thor came back and, well, he was not happy. He rebuilt part of Asgard over the White House, and Iron Man rolls in thinking he'd get Thor to join his team and follow the government's orders, but Thor is just not having it, especially with Iron Man acting all bossy and making clones of him and whatnot. So Thor shows him what's what. He thrashes Iron Man's super fancy suit, striking him multiple times with lightning and leaving him defenseless. Gripping Tony by the throat, Thor reminds Tony just who's a god and who's the puny mortal. Iron Man tries to smooth things over by offering diplomatic immunity for Asgard, but with his most powerful suit now completely trashed, Tony ends up hitching a ride back to town in the back of a pickup truck. At number 6 is Scarlet Witch. Tony Stark's genius mind has led him to create some incredible armor, but he hasn't been able to engineer a suit impervious to magic. Enter Scarlet Witch. In What If Avengers Disassembled, the Avengers rush to Genosha to halt Scarlet Witch and Captain America's world-ending plan. Scarlet Witch effortlessly robs Iron Man of his armor and sends him in the air with her magic, ending the confrontation pretty instantly. And in another clash, Avengers issue number 3, Scarlet Witch, now embodying Famine, unleashes her chaos magic, stripping Tony of his armor yet again. Even after getting his armor back, her magic disrupts it, leaving Tony ineffective for the rest of the battle, saved only by Spider-Man's intervention. At number 5 is Black Panther. Despite Tony's high-tech armor and knack for predicting attacks, T'Challa has caught him off guard multiple times. Black Panther's smarts and martial arts skills put him way ahead in the fight. In Black Panther number 45, T'Challa pulls off a surprise move using Mr. Clean, yes, the household cleaner, on Iron Man. The ammonia in it messes up Tony's stealth armor, and T'Challa goes old school by tracking him down by scent. But the kicker here is that he momentarily stops Tony with the Ultron virus, technically knocking out Iron Man cold. At number 4 is the Hulk vs. Iron Man from Original Sin. See, in this one, Bruce Banner delves into his past through Utatu's eye, peering into his own origin story from this omnipotent perspective. He actually witnesses Tony's hand in sabotaging the Gamma Bomb, and therefore was directly responsible in triggering the blast that first turned Bruce Banner into the Hulk. And let's just say Bruce wasn't too happy about it. Driven by rage, Bruce enhances himself using the Extremis virus to retain his intellect as the Hulk. He then confronts Tony, and despite Tony's lack of memory about sabotaging the Gamma Bomb, a brutal fight ensues where the Hulk, now maintaining his smarts, overwhelms Tony, obliterating his specially designed Hulkbuster armor with a single blow. Iron Man's only escape from the Hulk's wrath is to flee and suit up in new armor to survive the confrontation. At number 3 is the Winter Soldier, a victim of brainwashing, but Steve Rogers, aka Cap, helped him break free from that brain control and remember who he was, Bucky Barnes. And in a pivotal moment following Steve's apparent demise after Civil War, the Winter Soldier sought retribution against Iron Man, blaming him for Steve's demise. The showdown between them escalated swiftly, with Iron Man struggling defensively against the Winter Soldier's calculated moves. Using an electromagnetic pulse, Iron Man tried to fend off his assailant, but the Winter Soldier's strategic maneuvering led to Tony's suit malfunctioning. Cornered and unmasked, Tony faced a chilling moment with a pew-pew pointed right at his noggin. However, leveraging Steve's letter, Tony managed to negotiate for his life, ultimately paving the way for Winter Soldier to take up the mantle of Captain America. And number 2 is Kitty Pryde. In the midst of Avengers vs. X-Men, Kitty Pryde, with her tech skills and power to phase through things, played a major move against Iron Man. In A and X, Kitty and Tony team up against the villain, the Brood. Tony tries to recruit Kitty, showing her around his place, but a sneeze from Kitty births some Brood creatures with her powers. Taking charge, Kitty guides them to where Tony's armor is and phases through the suits during the battle, inadvertently frying them all at once. This left Tony without his precious armor, all thanks to Kitty's unique powers put to good use. And at number 1 is Rogue. In X-Men Legacy number 267, Rogue's unpredictable mutant ability to absorb powers gave her the upper hand against Iron Man. When Tony Stark targeted the school to find hope in the Phoenix Force, Rogue absorbed the She-Hulk's powers, and let's just say Rogue smashed. Enraged, Rogue amplified her strength with She-Hulk's powers and delivered a heavy blow to Iron Man's suit, a punch that literally went right through him, which should have ended the fight right then and there. However, when that didn't work, she just relentlessly pummeled him until his suit lay in ruins. Now, it's a good thing Tony was controlling the suit remotely, because otherwise he would have been done for.
Coming in at number 10, it's Batman. I bet you didn't expect to see this one on the list, and honestly, who would? I know who. Anyone who knows that Batman is Batman. In 1981's DC Special Series number 27, Batman comes upon the rampaging Green Rage monster. The Joker had tricked Hulk into believing that Batman was the enemy, and the Hulk ended up getting the Dark Knight in a bear hug where he almost broke the Bat's back, but Batman busts out of it and uses a knockout gas. Now, Hulk ain't really that dumb, and he just kind of holds his breath until Batman kicks him straight in the gut, winding the Hulk and causing him to breathe in the gas. Yeah, it's probably unrealistic as hell, but it's a man that fights criminals in a bat suit fighting a guy that turns into a giant green monster because of gamma rays from a bomb. Tell me how that's realistic. Number 9, Thor. When Kal Borson, the Serpent, sent down 7 magical hammers that represented his 7 magical followers to Earth, the hammer Null found its way to our lovely green friend, transforming him into Null, Breaker of Worlds. Now Hulk/Null went a-smashin', rampaging all over South America, bringing him into conflict with the Avengers, who he defeated, and eventually with a solo Thor. When fighting Thor, Null teamed up with angrier Breaker of Souls, which was actually Ben Grimm, the Thing. So not only is Thor taking on the Hulk, who is more than a handful, but he took on the Thing, one of Hulk's biggest rivals, at the same time. And both of these guys were powered up by the magical hammers that they wielded. Thor then proceeds to literally and temporarily take the Thing's life by throwing Mjolnir straight through him, leaving a massive hole in the Thing's chest. Thor and the Hulk then face off in an epic battle that ends with Thor managing to knock the Hulk into space, leaving Thor seriously injured, but winning the fight. Number 8, Wolverine. Wolverine actually made his debut in 1974's The Incredible Hulk number 181. He interfered in a fight between the Hulk and the Wendigo, which saw Wolvie and Hulk team up to beat the monster, but also saw a little kerfuffle between Big Green and the Angry Canadian. Now, 8 years later, What If number 31 imagined what would have happened if Wolverine managed to take down the Hulk, which he did by clawing through his throat. Pretty nasty. But their nastiest bout was definitely in Old Man Logan. Following a huge conflict where the villains managed to band together and wipe out almost all the heroes, a pretty sinister Bruce Banner took over a section of California with his inbred kids, the Hulk Gang. In the last few issues of that story, in revenge for the Hulk wiping out his family, Wolverine went on the warpath and eradicated most of the gang. Banner then hulked out into this 30-foot tall, nasty Hulk and ate Wolverine alive, only for Wolverine to reform inside of his stomach and cut his way out. The Hulk would survive as a head on a metal body after this, only for the sole surviving Hulk gang member to decapitate him to save Wolverine's life later on. The living head would then be buried deep underground to keep it from ever coming back again. Number 7, Iron Man. We all know of the famous Hulkbuster suit, but would it just blow your minds if I told you that Iron Man has actually defeated the Hulk without it? Yes, that is right. In Iron Man issue 132, our Golden Avenger faced off mano-a-mano against the strongest Green Avenger, and when I tell you this was one hell of a fight, I ain't lying. After an attempt at helping Bruce Banner results in the Hulk persona emerging, Tony dons his suit and protects his employees. The fight goes from Stark Industries to underwater to an Air Force base where the two basically play baseball with a luggage carrier and Tony's favorite jet. The resulting explosions stunned the Hulk, and in that moment, Tony mustered every bit of solar and reserve energy he could, overriding the safety protocols of his own suit to hit the stunned Hulk with a singular massive punch that knocked out Hulk and killed that suit of armor completely. Number 6, Robert Downey Jr. The MCU gave us a good look at just why Iron Man is no pushover when it pitted a rage off the hinges Hulk against the newly unveiled Hulkbuster armor created by Tony Stark. Now this fight is awesome. First off, the high-octane speed of it keeps it engaging literally the whole time. Secondly, it perfectly shows how much of a threat the Hulk can actually pose and how absolutely terrifying he actually is. And thirdly, bouncing off of that, Robert Downey Jr. shows us both how utterly terrifying it would be to fight a monster like the Hulk in a suit of armor, but while still remaining incredibly hilarious and delivering every line with a perfect mix of fear, humor, and high stress that the 4-minute and 20-second scene deserves. Like, how could we forget the go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep thing? That's so funny. And bonus points for the end of the scene when the Hulk finally sees the amount of destruction and pain he has caused. It lets us into his mind just a little bit until Iron Man knocks him out cold. Number 5, Hyperion. Hulk has only had a handful of battles against one of Marvel's iterations of a Superman-like character, Hyperion. And funnily enough, this time it's almost always Hyperion who comes out on top. Hyperion hails from a different universe from Earth 616 and is usually the leader of a group of Justice League-like heroes called the Squadron Supreme. Hyperion and Hulk were both on the Avengers at the same time, and the two were pitted against one another in a couple of instances. In Jonathan Hickman's 2013 Avengers run, issue number 3, a brainwashed Hulk is sicked on a Hyperion, and while the battle kind of happens in the background, Hyperion manages to punch the Hulk out of the Hulk, turning him back into Bruce Banner again. Now that is a feat all of its own, but there was another fight more recently in Heroes Reborn number 2 by Jason Aaron. This story found a new Hyperion who had just wiped out Galactus by flying straight through his head, fought off against versions of Gladiator and the Imperial Guard, Mr. Beyonder, and a giant version of Ultron. The last thing he needed to do was stop the Hulk. Hyperion finds him trying to tell a group of kids about how he's not crazy, how history has changed, and how he's really sad, which makes it almost upsetting after the Hulk gets his hands on Hyperion's throat, and Hyperion invokes an executive order and uses his laser eyes to blow holes in the Hulk, taking his life 24 times until he finally stops getting back up. Number 4, Spider-Man. Now, in terms of raw power, Spider-Man stands absolutely no chance against the Hulk. I think his spider sense may give him some kind of advantage, but there's no way he's lasting long in that fight. Unless he gets a power boost in the form of, I don't know, the Enigma Force, turning him into Captain Universe, maybe? And that's exactly what happened in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 328. The Grey Hulk, who, yes, is a bit weaker and logical compared to his savage counterpart, is hired by Sebastian Shaw to target Spider-Man, and money is always a good motivator. Unfortunately, though, for the Hulk, Spider-Man has been going to the cosmic gym and hitting the cosmic weights. He lands some pretty heavy blows on the Grey Goliath and even blinds him with a new I-beam power. But when some kids are put in danger, though, Spider-Man ends the conflict quick by punching the Hulk all the way into orbit and then flying up to save him before he suffocates. Then Spider-Man just stands all confident with his hands on his hips, kind of like this, but like more confident, you know what I mean? Number 3, Havoc. Havoc, who you may know as the brother of Cyclops, found himself in quite the showdown with the Green Goliath in Incredible Hulk number 150. It all started with a little bit of a mix-up. You see, the Hulk thought that Polaris was his long-lost love, Jarella, the Princess of Kai from the Microverse. So in his confusion and a little bit of heartbreak, he whisked Polaris up a cliff, and Havoc, being the hero that he is and also Polaris' boyfriend, rushed to the rescue. In an attempt to fend off the Hulk, Havoc unleashed his powerful energy waves, but here's the thing. This attack did absolutely nothing. It didn't really do anything to the Hulk at all, so it was looking pretty rough for Havoc until he spotted an opportunity. The Hulk, being just absolutely off the chain, decided to pick up a small mountain, like you do. And that's when Havoc hatched a cunning plan. He focused all of his energy waves like a laser beam, aiming right at the Hulk's big green forehead. Now this seriously strained the Hulk as he grappled with the weight of the mountain that he chose to pick up like an idiot. The combined stress of the mountain and Havoc's energy waves got to be too much for the Hulk, and he eventually passed out, dropping a mountain on himself. For Havoc, that is a huge win. Number 2, Namor. Namor, the Prince of Atlantis, has a level of strength that I think surprises a lot of people, and it may be because his level of power is closely tied to his proximity to water. When submerged, his strength is unrivaled. He can even lift and throw massive and heavy objects like water-filled ocean liners. So, if the Hulk were to challenge Namor, the smart move would be to battle on dry land. However, the Hulk's not that smart. In Avengers number 3, the Hulk made the error of confronting Namor in the water. And a few panels later, Namor managed to drag the unconscious Hulk to the shore. Namor's water-based advantage came into play once more in Tales to Astonish number 100, where he used it to defeat the Green Goliath. Their powerful blows generated a massive tsunami that destroyed an entire island base. Interestingly though, even in more casual contests, Namor has outperformed the Hulk. In an unconventional power test, the two engaged in a game of underwater chicken in Incredible Hulk number 118, and neither of these guys chickened out, as you might expect. But in the end, Namor emerged unscathed, while the Hulk was knocked out completely, reverting to his form as Banner. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's The Thing. The Thing and the Incredible Hulk are kind of like the Marvel Universe's version of Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. I read an article that said that, and I think it's funny and I think it's true, so I'm using it. They share a complicated friendship, filled with epic battles, usually resulting in a draw, or the Hulk will take the win. However, back in 1961, The Thing managed to secure a win. It's essential to note that the Hulk was in his Gray or Joe Fixit form, which is a lesser known persona. Unlike the Green Hulk, this version, Joe Fixit, is more intelligent and has better reasoning abilities, meaning he doesn't get as angry as quickly. And we all know that the Hulk's strength amplifies with his anger, so Grey Hulk isn't as mighty as the Green version. Additionally, during this particular face-off, The Thing was in his super spiky form, making it a remarkable matchup. In Fantastic Four number 320, Dr. Doom goads Hulk into chasing after The Thing, saying he's powered up and stronger than Hulk is, and you know that's gonna piss off the Hulk. Hulk sets out to New York to defeat The Thing, but gets his butt handed to him. After a slog of a fight that will cost taxpayers a ton, The Thing almost ends up putting the Hulk into the afterlife until he's caught off guard by this really random Hulk robot that just comes out of nowhere. It's weird. I don't know.
The X-Men are generally thought of as one of Marvel's greatest superhero teams, but even they struggle sometimes in conflicts with other supes. When it comes to the Hulk, there was a time where he ended up humbling the X-Men. Now, this was during World War Hulk. Hulk blamed a group of people for sending him to space, known as the Illuminati. The Illuminati are their own secret group made up of a bunch of guys who basically consider themselves to be among the elite when it comes to the smartest people on Earth. Not every genius hero has joined them though. In fact, some who were offered a place originally on the team were wise enough to decline that offer. Now when I say wise, I kinda mean it, as this is the team who ultimately did decide to send Hulk to space because he was considered too much of a danger on Earth. Hulk is sent away but returns to Earth for revenge due to the spaceship that he landed in exploding, destroying the new place that he had come to call his home. You may recognize its name, Sakaar. One person who he blames is an Illuminati member, Charles Xavier, though Charles was not actually at the meeting when it was decided to send Hulk away. When Hulk comes a-calling on the X-Men, he manages to beat them pretty badly. Fortunately, they are able to kinda shame him with some words into just like stopping his rampage here. Still safe to say that the X-Men would struggle in a fight against someone as powerful as the Hulk. If you had to say anyone that you feel like would struggle in a fight against the Hulk, who do you think that would be? If the Hulk can take on, you know, most of the X-Men. Pretty impressive. Spider-Man is a hero who ended up besting the X-Men when two of them were possessed by the Phoenix Force. Yep, you heard that right, the Phoenix Force. How did he do it? Well, actually not with his fists, but with his wits. Spider-Man was actually just squaring off with them to give the Avengers some time to retreat, but he managed to do one better after he manipulated Magic and Colossus, sister and brother, into turning on one another. Tony at least has tried to humble the X-Men. Now, he wasn't as successful as some others that are on our list, but he did try to do so by comparing kind of hands with them. Not a great move on his part, to be honest. This all went down during the first Civil War when he had a chat with Emma Frost, one of his ex-flames to be honest. He attempted to compare the Avengers to the X-Men, saying that they also had to deal with prejudice too. However, while he did attempt to humble Emma into backing down, this ultimately backfired, causing her to remind him of just how much hate and prejudice mutants had to deal with, including, you know, things like the catastrophic events that happened on Genosha. Don't think the Avengers have ever had that level of hate thrown against them, you know what I mean? While the covers for the Fantastic Four versus the X-Men comic from the 80s would leave you believing that the FF were the ones who were very much bested here, in the end they were actually the ones who kinda got the last laugh, with the little Franklin Richards joining forces with Lockheed and actually flying in and pretty much shaming everyone in the end with the state of Kitty Pryde, who was actually not doing so well at this time, and I believe it's kind of at the center of this conflict. I just love Franklin flying in and basically being like, are you guys really fighting right now? Like, Kitty is maybe about to die. Like, hello? Just a little, of course a little kid would just come in and be like, hey, everyone, let's just chill out. In this turn of events, Cyclops played right into Wade Wilson's hands. This was when Deadpool was given temporary membership to the X-Men. It turns out though that they had basically only offered Deadpool a place on the team, a temporary place on the team, because they wanted to keep a close eye on him, because yeah, they didn't trust him. While hurt by this revelation, Deadpool still did his best to play his part as an X-Men, regardless of whether or not his membership was considered to be real, by helping the mutants out. He even took the fall for them to help save their public image, and then in the end antagonized Psyche so that he'd fight an unmasked Deadpool while Wade was wearing his own unofficial X-Men costume. Once again to help them with PR. In the end, while he didn't want to, Cyclops was forced to admit that indeed, Deadpool did have moves. The Inhumans gave the mutants a run for their money sort of accidentally during IVX, Inhumans vs X-Men. During this event, the Inhumans didn't really intend to hurt the X-Men, it was more of just a thing that like kinda happened here. This happened when the Inhumans' Terrigen clouds were released into Earth's atmosphere. They didn't know at the time, but it turned out that the Terrigen mists were actually really poisonous to mutants, even fatal. Cyclops early on actually died as a result of exposure, but Emma Frost, seeking to get revenge on the Inhumans, decided to make it seem as though Black Bolt had actually killed Cyclops during what could have ended up being peace talks had Emma not, you know, been manipulating this whole scenario. Instead, communication broke down and it ended up being an all-out war between the two sides, although eventually the mutants would realize that Emma had basically manipulated them into fighting this war against the Inhumans, and the X-Men and Inhumans would ultimately kind of team up to take down Emma. Black Panther managed to humble, or at least shame, one X-Men during the Ten of Swords event in the lead up to the Otherworld tournament. In the lead up to the tournament, both Arakko and Krakoa were basically given a list of champions, and each champion had a specific blade, a specific sword, you know, Ten of Swords, they had to recover to be able to enter this tournament. Storm's blade was located in Wakanda and was basically tied to the heritage and the lore of the people and the land. Storm went to Wakanda and asked for this blade, which was a super important item to them, but was told she would basically have to wait until Black Panther had returned because he was kind of the one that had to make that call. However, worrying that the delay would basically mean that she would miss the deadline to enter, and possibly not confident in maybe what Black Panther's answer would be, considering they have a romantic history, but it's also gone really bad before in the past, Storm instead decided to put her thief hat back on and just steal the weapon. Right after she'd acquired it and was kinda on her way out the door, Black Panther arrived back at the palace and basically confronted her, not taking the blade back, but basically condemning her for choosing to steal it in the first place and for her lack of faith in both him and in Wakanda. I love how the X-Men are constantly working to humble each other, like when Emma Frost decided to call Professor X out for how he treated and kind of manipulated Scott Summers over the years. She put a plant sort of in his mind and managed in essence to take control of his psyche to kind of torment him, but also to make him see why Scott basically didn't need him anymore, and how he'd actually done a lot of harm to Cyclops over the years. This all went down in X-Men Legacy issue number 216, and also stood to show just how powerful of a telepath Emma Frost truly is. During Executioner's Song, a whole X-Men team ended up being taken out by, get this, Wolverine. See what I'm saying? X-Men fighting X-Men. What's going on? Granted, it wasn't the X-Men team, but it was an X-Men adjacent team, so I think we can count it. After taking out Shatterstar, the X-Force team would also be tracked down by Wolverine and taken out primarily by him and by Psylocke, forced to surrender to the Blue X-Men and X-Factor teams respectively, and they were backed into a corner fairly easily, honestly, with Wolverine choosing to hunt them down and citing it as one of the things he is best known for, which honestly, true. Although I imagine X-Force, like the other teams here, also felt pretty conflicted about fighting against their friends. So this, combined with Wolverine's ruthlessness, probably helped to convince them to, you know, maybe just surrender. You've probably heard of a little well-known event called Avengers vs. X-Men. This event stood to highlight some of the feuds, some of the tension between these two teams and their individual members that had been brewing for, honestly, years. Chiefly though, the fight was over the Phoenix Force. The Phoenix was returning to bond with, as the mutants believe, its current ideal host, Hope Summers. At least that was their working theory. They didn't know for sure. The Avengers, because, you know, they didn't know for sure what was going on with this, wanted it gone. They felt it was too dangerous. The two fought, which now seems ironic, since although the Phoenix has long been linked to mutants and of course mutant-based stories, and the Avengers were very anti-Phoenix at this time, the Avengers also recently had the Phoenix as a member on their team when the Phoenix Force was merged with Echo, aka Maya Lopez. So it's pretty funny in retrospect when we think about that. Now of course, Thanos in the comics is still a big deal, but in the MCU I feel like they beefed him up even more. So much so that a lot of people compare Thanos to Darkseid. Thanos is kind of like Marvel's Darkseid equivalent. Even in the comics, sure, but the MCU reality lifted him up to be on the same level as DC's Darkseid and make him once again worthy of that comparison. Thanos is also obviously super overpowered in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he is armed with the Infinity Gauntlet and wielding all of the Infinity Stones. If you can survive doing so, this would make almost any character unstoppable. But honestly, even in the comics when Thanos has not been armed with the Gauntlet, he has managed to decimate entire planets and threaten the existence of life on Earth and throughout the universe time and time again. It's the Mad Titan's strong will and his determination, as well as his physical might and prowess, that honestly just makes him so deadly. And he's just very committed. He's a committed guy. Which villain do you think is the most committed? Let me know in the comments. Khonshu is an interesting one because most people wouldn't think of Khonshu as a villain. Khonshu is the god of the moon who also happens to be the being that gives Mark Spector, aka Moon Knight, his power set. At least, depending on which story we're reading, but for the most part, that's how it goes. So with Khonshu being attached to a hero, you wouldn't really think that he'd be going up against Avengers, and yet that is exactly what happened in the age of Khonshu here. Khonshu manipulated Mark into doing his bidding, getting him to take from the Avengers elements of their power so that they could use those to fight against a greater threat, which was Mephisto. The problem with this being that while Khonshu did want to do this so that he could defeat Mephisto, who is obviously a really bad guy at the end of the day, Khonshu also wanted to take over Earth, kind of, and turn it into like an Egyptian afterlife, if you would. In the end, even Moon Knight turned on Khonshu once this was revealed and ended up joining up with the Avengers instead. The group of them were then able to beat Khonshu back together, and he actually ended up pretty much imprisoned. But this doesn't change the fact that through Moon Knight, Khonshu was actually able to humble pretty much everybody on this team here. It's kind of unfortunate what happened to the Chaos King. He actually seemed like a pretty neat villain in theory. The event that he is primarily known for is Chaos War. Unfortunately, Chaos War took place right before the Epic Fear Itself event in terms of Marvel chronological print history, and pretty much just became like overshadowed by that. Ultimately, it also felt less planned out. The Chaos King, also known as Amatsu Mikaboshi, is a cosmic entity, and basically a Japanese god who met his end during the events of Chaos War, where he was defeated. So we got an Egyptian god and we got a Japanese god. During Chaos War, the Chaos King used his powers to reverse life and death, meaning that dead heroes came back to life while those who had been alive were now deceased instead. As a Japanese kami, he has godlike powers, making him insanely durable and strong, while also having supernatural abilities as well. The Chaos King's powers were more dark in origin though when it came to their magic type. Raquel managed to pull one over on the Avengers and honestly most of the cosmos and all of Earth, after years later revealing that she actually had not died but had been alive the whole time, undercover and secretly scheming to unite the Kree and Skrull empires under the rule of her grandson. It had also been so long that her return was mostly met with confusion from a lot of fans at that point, because many who were reading her reappearance actually didn't recognize her at first. Even I had to do some digging to fully understand the importance of who she was. I finished that issue and was like, huh? Who is this? And then I was like, oh, Raquel, cool. Raquel was once one of the rulers of the Skrull Empire. Unlike Varanki, who was made queen after the Skrull's homeworld fell, Raquel was actually the Skrull Empress back when the homeworld was still around and doing well. Raquel first appeared back in 1979 and would perish in the comics in issue 257 of Fantastic Four in 1983, only a few short years later. She returned a few years ago in the Empire event, where she was revealed to be Hulkling's grandmother, who survived the destruction of Tarnax 4 and who had actually been working, like I said, behind the scenes undercover as a Kree pursuer while putting into motion her plan to unite the Skrull and Kree empires together, which did work and we got the alliance. Ultron is an interesting character. The amount of times they have almost succeeded in destroying all of humanity and the Avengers is honestly pretty impressive. And while Ultron may have not succeeded fully in taking the Avengers out, they have at least taken down one Avenger at the time seemingly permanently, for a while seemingly permanently, because this character was gone for a long time until recently. That would be their creator, Hank Pym, aka Ant-Man. Ant-Man ended up being merged with Ultron, and although initially it was believed that he was still alive in there but just existing within a shared consciousness, we would actually later learn that he did not actually survive this process, and it was instead at that moment that he became deceased, despite some of his physical form still seeming to survive. However, as of Avengers Inc., Hank has returned, but still, for a while there, he was pretty perma-dead. The Progenitor is really a superhero who humbled the Avengers by simply judging them. The Progenitor put the Avengers to a test in multiple ways. One of the ways they actually challenged the Avengers and all of the heroes of Earth's strength was when they came to judge humanity. The other is when they challenged the Avengers in the way of their own capability, as Iron Man, aka Tony Stark, was actually one of the Avengers to work on creating the Progenitor, and even after that, the Progenitor still was not made to be a hero. Literally helped make the Progenitor, and then the Progenitor turned around and was like, actually I'm gonna judge all of humanity now. Not a great look. And this was a Celestial that was of course also based off of Tony Stark's nervous system. It was partially based off of Tony, and yet still not a hero. So what does that say about Iron Man? I do not know, although I love that Iron Man still got judged with a thumbs up. Hilarious. But regardless of this, the Progenitor also tested each and every Avengers member on a one-on-one basis. When they decided that humanity might not be worth saving, the Earth might not be worth saving, and in order to decide, they would actually have to judge each person on Earth individually. Some Avengers succeeded and passed this test, and some Avengers failed their tests. But ultimately, they opened themselves up to be judged by the Progenitor by being part of the Progenitor's creation, and also kind of put the entire world at stake. So Yeah. Speaking of villains who just love to pull the wool over the Avengers' eyes, which of course many on our list have tried here, up next we are talking about Mephisto. During the 2021 Heroes Reborn event, Mephisto was revealed to be basically the big bad behind all of this. Heroes Reborn, or this version of Heroes Reborn anyways, was a world in which the Squadron Supreme were the premier superhero team of the world, being known there as the Squadron Supreme of America. In this reality, there were no Avengers here, there was only the Squadron Supreme, and we'd later learn that Mephisto was actually the one behind creating this Squadron Supreme and was actually in league with, get this, Phil Coulson. Yeah, in this event, Agent Phil Coulson, he's also evil. It was pretty crazy. Fortunately, in the end, the Avengers were able to figure out what was going on, fight back, and change the world back to normal, but still, it was pretty crazy that Mephisto was even able to change the world so drastically to begin with, and the Avengers were just like, I don't know what happened. I don't know. It was weird. For the most part anyways. I'm not even disappointed in the Avengers for being humbled by this next villain here. We're talking about Magus. Magus is the evil alternate of Adam Warlock, kind of like his evil twin. Basically. Magus's main thing is the Church of Universal Truth, which inherently doesn't sound very evil based on the name or bad, but it is actually very evil and very bad, just trust me. At one point, he threatens all of Earth's heroes when he attacks Earth with doppelgangers of each hero. Just as he is a dark reflection of Adam Warlock, each hero on Earth then has to face a dark reflection of themselves, and it's during this attack that he actually threatens to basically completely overthrow or, conquer Earth and all of its heroes. Immortus is an interesting villain. Technically, Immortus is also Kang the Conqueror, but Immortus is also an alternate version of Kang from sort of like a different timeline. Time-traveling villains, time-traveling people, it's weird. Immortus has been a foe of the Avengers multiple times and has done a few things to humble them, especially specific members. For this point, I'm mostly going to talk about Iron Man and Captain Marvel. Immortus made it so that Iron Man would be a sleeper agent working for them, activating them and turning them on their own team, the Avengers. In the end, Tony did rise above Immortus' influence and ultimately sacrificed himself to save his team, going back to the side of good in his final moments, but it was a pretty devastating blow having their own team member turn on them and threaten to defeat, well, pretty much all of them at the behest of their nemesis, Immortus, aka kinda Kang. When it comes to Carol Danvers' interaction with Immortus, I'm actually more talking about Immortus' son here, Marcus Immortus. Still, it was through learning from his father that Marcus was able to take and also forcefully seduce Carol, and later managed to convince her to basically run away with him and leave the Avengers, which was a whole weird thing that happened. It wasn't good, but it also goes to show you just how influential Immortus can be and how dangerous he can be through that influence. And here I tried to save the best and honestly kind of the most spoilery, most recent one for last. That is if you've been reading current comics, because this one is coming at us from Blood Hunt. For those who haven't been following along with Blood Hunt, it's the newest event over at Marvel Comics, at least at the time of this recording. It is an event that we're going to see throughout the summer. The whole of the Marvel Universe is going to have to band together as they deal with a massive global vampire invasion. And in issue number 1 of Blood Hunt, the Avengers are already not looking so good when they come up against a group known as the Blood Coven. The Blood Coven are a group of vampires that have fed on supernatural blood and basically each have supernatural traits. They use their powers, their special abilities to take on the Avengers, and in their first encounter pretty much handily defeat almost all of them. Yikes. Not only do they defeat the Avengers team, but they also defeat one of their sort of members as well, who is also like their headquarters, and that's their base that is known as the City, which is a member of the team as well because the City also has sentience. You know what's bad? When the Avengers are down and so is their base. Yikes.